I guess that's what I want right now. Musician's philosophy, I guess.
You're a musician, man. You're a musician.
I mean, who knows?
Huh? Who knows?
Who knows?
I'm not a musician.
They're both musicians. They own like.
No. But you see, okay, but here's the thing, Tanmay, for us, right? For me, I don't feel like I'm a musician. There are times when I feel probably as inadequate as a lot of my students, a lot of other people I work with might be feeling, and I don't look at myself as being a musician. Sometimes I hate the term, I hate the word, I hate the name or anything about it. Because there is an aspect of it is that you do get at some point caught up in identity, and if you're someone like myself, that identity situation could easily become an identity crisis as well, because you just blow things out of proportion in your head. But it does become it reaches a point where you wonder as to whether what you do defines who you are, and then you do what you do because of who you are, right? I think that there are loads of other aspects about what are the compelling reasons for me to get into music, which actually don't have to do with an active philosophical decision that says that I want to be a musician. I think some of it is a lot more passive. Some of it is a lot more driven from a place which I'm not entirely in control of, and that is why I don't want to ask the question. That's why I don't want to go there.
So you avoid the question in a way?
No, it's just that I think it's hidden so deep inside that it's beyond me, it's beyond my awareness.
Let me actually throw this at you. Before I have a point to make with his point, but I'll throw this at you. What is a musician?
I was gonna ask that.
Who is a musician? What is a musician? Who is a musician?
I would define a musician if others recognize you as a musician, then I believe you're a musician.
That's just recognition. That's just term somebody's given you. What is a musician? That's
Jesus Christ died by that rule, my friend.
Uh-huh.
You know.
So anyway, pick up his point. I would say the only time I would call myself a musician is when like you get all these people saying, "What do you, beta, kya karte ho?" I mean, like they come and ask you, "What do you do in life?" And then you have to sum everything that you do, and you have to tell them so that they would understand. So then you say, "I am a musician," and then judge you for it straight away. But that's a different matter. But like it's a term you use, I guess, on people who wouldn't understand what all it involves, but maybe to help communicate some idea of what it can do or what it holds, right?
Yeah.
Like for people like, especially people who are in the previous generations, right? The more older in the generation you go, the lesser they understand the broad spectrum of things.
The abstractness.
Somebody who is involved with music can do. So for them, the more you explain it, the more confused they're gonna get also, right? You say I'm a musician, they're like, he plays music. That's it. That's all they need to know.
How would you define a musician, Adhiraj?
Someone who plays music, or plays a musical instrument rather. So that's where I would have a problem, in the sense that, then
How much
the
playing do you
Piper of
need?
Hamelin comes to mind, or the Three Musicians of Bremen, or whatever preachers they are.
Anybody in the world who plays an
yeah.
instrument is now a musician.
But I mean, just because I'm a snob, I don't necessarily want to be associating myself just by term with the guy who's busking at the street corner, in a man bun and slippers and playing a gong drum, something like that, right? Because he's Australian.
You've just alienated all the audience with man buns.
Stereotype
Fair
101.
enough. I have no apologies to offer there. But I mean, for some reason, those guys do something. They wear man buns, then they wear kurtas, and then they wear pajamas. It's just a thing. I don't know why, right? But in any case, because for me it's not just that, and in fact that's probably the least of it. I find the prospect of playing an instrument, of playing music, sometimes to be extremely daunting. Sometimes I don't like it. These guys know that. I've been very lucky to have a very bunch of supportive, supportive musicians to play with and work with, right? But it's I mean, definitely the performance of it or something is not always it is not always what it's about. I could as much be a teacher or a squash coach or something or the other as I am a musician, vocationally, I guess, in that sense. So I don't really know.
I feel like if you call us musicians, you're saying that you're restricting the what we do, right? Right. Like I said, we're teachers also. Technically, we are just teachers, right? At the core of it all, and then we're just musicians because we can play instruments also. So we're teachers who are musicians.
But you're a
who are
teacher
this,
because
who
you
are
learn
that.
music.
No, I'm
You could be teaching something
teaching
else,
music because I know it well,
Okay.
right? I don't have to be a musician to know it well. But again, if you're like you said, if you're a snob, then you'd be like, no, it doesn't work like that. You have to know it really well to be a musician, right? Ultimately, like you asked him what's a musician, and he said what?
He just gave a very
He said anybody who can play instrument,
anybody
right?
could play an instrument.
So you don't need to have knowledge to play instrument. It's pretty easy to play any instrument in the world.
But that begs the question. You both have had students who have started from ground up. As teachers, when do you feel that now the student is sort of he's entered into the mind realm of a musician?
I don't. That's never a benchmark for me.
Yeah.
I never even think of it.
As not as a benchmark, but it's just as a intuition. Now you feel that is
No, there are three very, very separate things. The one benchmark is when is there a reasonable amount of dexterity with the instrument to the point where someone can teach themselves. That is really, really important. That independence is important. Second...
Sorry, I just want to interrupt. I think you might be using the word dexterity wrong there. I think you should use the word proficient. When you feel like they're proficient enough to be able to put themselves on it. Because dexterity just gives you like, okay, I can maneuver around the instrument. Right? Proficiency means you understand the instrument to a certain degree to be able to... No?
No, it would be dexterity.
Okay.
Because then the other thing would be, this is where the proficiency would come in, is that are they able to then utilize the instrument to express themselves, not just to play anything, but to express themselves, whatever it is that they say, right? Now, the journey from there on is fraught with difficulty, right? It's, it's the equivalent of a caterpillar walking across a forest in the hope that it's not going to get
But then
knocked
you
out
believe
before
that
it.
that's where that journey begins. When you can actually say something with your instrument, at least express yourself.
That's where a different journey begins, right? Before that is a journey to be able to get with the instrument, right?
That's one part. The other one is the more difficult one, the expressing, because so you can express yourself on your instrument if you know that you need to express yourself, but getting to that point is a very difficult point. And we know it, all of us know it, we've all been in situations where you've had your parent shouting down your throat, or you've had a teacher shouting down your throat, and you want to say something back and you're quivering with rage or fear or something or the other, and all you can do is gulp. It's you having to cross that in your head every time you feel that you want to say something. So now for me, that's where the story is, and that's where the game is, right? And it's really interesting because it doesn't become about how good or bad I can play. There are times when I see a student and I see them struggle, and all I'm thinking of is the words that I heard when someone else saw me struggle. And a lot of times they were words of encouragement, and that is what gave me the strength or the perseverance to just take an additional step, and increase my proficiency or increase my dexterity or keep at something, not cast something away, things like that. There were times when at the same time I sang a note wrong. I remember getting slapped 20 times, and one after the other. It's just tuck 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 like that. I either sang a note wrong, or I forgot a lyric or something like that. So there were those as well. So the decisions for me were then, which of these do you choose to pass on? Which of these do you choose to sort of keep off the table? Because only then are you really dealing with expression. Only then are you dealing with someone saying, I have an instrument, but if I can't say what I want to say, then I can't express myself on it. And then if I can say what I want to say, how do I express myself on it? And then the world opens up for you, and it becomes very beautiful. It becomes nice. Whatever that means, whatever that picture is for you, that's what music is for me.
I don't know if you'd agree or not, but I believe if I have to make a line that a person is a musician, I think that would be it.
I don't know.
Can you really say that for people? Can you really say that for everybody? That everybody's gonna reach that line? If you're calling it a line, that means it's a fixed
Yeah,
stretch,
I am
right?
fixing it a little bit.
People are not equal.
Fair, but like,
Nobody can
it's
reach
a
that stretch.
abstract line. Like, you have to express something.
What if I know somebody who's been playing for years and he's really good at his instrument. He's one of the top, but he cannot express himself on an instrument. What are you going to call him then? What are you going to say to him then? He's not passed. Technically, then according to your standard, he hasn't passed the line.
He hasn't passed the line.
Then what's happening there? If you tell him these are my chords, I want you to play all these I want to play these crazy things. I want to play a solo, and he'll do it because he can do it, and it's easy for him to do it. But he can't express himself.
Have you actually encountered anyone like
All the time.
who are really good with their
many
instrument, but
times.
they're not really good with expression of music?
Or they're
So
not
many times.
interested at all. They could not be bothered. They're just in a totally different space. But they would put so many of us to shame. It's crazy.
Instrumentally.
Anythingly. Instrumentally, I've got a collection of songs. I've never published them. It's just I've got my own little life going on. I did this. I worked with the Shipping Corporation of India, and so on and so forth, and stuff like that. Oh, I can sing opera. And the guy knows the lyrics to, God knows, how many different Spanish and Italian operas, kind of thing, rattling them off like that. So many of these people who could put a lot of people to shame.
I would term that person more of an instrumentalist, I guess.
Is that not a musician himself?
No.
I don't know what you're talking about. He was a master instrumentalist. I don't know what you're talking about.
So instrumentalist, you've seen those big music machine things would revolve around. Have you seen the marble machine on YouTube?
Yeah.
Have you?
The one where he rotates a crank and
Yeah.
things fall and they make them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that thing is playing music. So an instrumentalist who can play an instrument really well, but doesn't have an expression. To me, I think that's just the same as the marble machine. Would you differ?
I can stick my head into the exhaust pipe of a ship, and the engine would sound fantastic. At a given point in time, I think by the second time you've heard the marble machine, from my own experience, maybe by the third or fourth, it does begin to get a little annoying. Which is why I think you've also brought it up, right? In the sense that there is a certain.
I don't know anybody who would listen to it more than maybe once or twice.
And there was a little boy.
So I'll rephrase my question, and maybe it'll be better for you that way. I'm a law student. So we are taught there are two kinds of laws. There is substantial laws and there are procedural laws. And then I went to court, and I can see that everybody can learn the procedure really well. That's fine. Everybody can read it, everybody can learn it. But to really be good at substantial law, that's hard. So I'm going for that relation. So an instrumentalist is really good with the procedure of it, But a musician, you need to know the substance of it.
What's beyond a musician?
What's beyond a musician? I don't know. The bigger subset would probably be an artist.
So I think that if we started looking at all of those, as to, you know, if you say at the kernel of it, let's say, would be an instrumentalist, or whatever, you know, and then outside that, a musician or a multi-instrumentalist, if you will, because that exists as well, and then an artist, and then a theorist, and then a philosopher. Because I mean, you know, that's the way our degrees are also planned out, right? You know, you go to prep school and so on and so forth, and then you go to college, and then you do a bachelor's program, you do a master's, and then you do a PhD, which is a philosophy degree. So the thing is that if you're a philosopher, and then you study the philosophy of a subject, you've reached that level of, or some level at least of, some sense of attainment kind of thing. But I think there's more to music than instrumentalists and musicians. I think that some listeners make very good musicians.
Without being able to play anything.
I would actually stand by that. I think there are a lot of listeners who I would consider and respect for their musicality, for being extremely artistic in their analysis of and the reception of music.
You're talking about some friends or someone you can read about online? Just some
I don't know,
review?
but I don't read stuff online, man.
But then can you
I would,
elaborate
say,
on
I would
that?
say both.
Both.
I would
both.
actually, on this point, I would actually give you a better understanding of this. Basically, we live in India, right? Where when you talk to an average person and you talk to him about listening to music, then what you see is that what he understands or perceives, it's way below average. If you go to any of the so-called first world countries, the average listener itself is very intelligent, and they can appreciate, like he says, the many layers or depths of a musical piece. That immediately has made him a more musical listener. He or she may not know how to play an instrument, but they may be able to say, oh, there are those synthesizers, that bass line, and those violins playing that make up the back of the music, whatever. And this is actually, the number of people who can do this is higher in other countries. We are just exposed to it being a lower number here because that's what it is here.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Make sense to you?
Yeah, definitely.
No, the one of the things that I would credit the let's say the first world with is this sense of organization, right? And there is at times there is a need for it. You know, bees aren't great at what they do for no reason, and the same goes for ants, right? You know, you might want to ask the tigers why they're going extinct. Okay, they hang around alone. They don't work. No, I'm serious. They don't work well in groups, right? So there are lots of lessons to be drawn from things like this now. So the West is really good at ordering things, organizing them, and then passing it back to you in a language that is really, really friendly. It's so friendly that all of us here in India understand English. It's really friendly. It's very easy, you know.
Yeah.
You could go anywhere, and you could potentially get by, you know, by speaking English. China is very resistant to English, but they'll still allow you. You know, the only place that might not is France because they don't want to, but they still understand it because they've organized it in this particular fashion, right? I think it becomes certain aspects of it become very accessible. I think that's what it is. But that means that if someone were to want to learn about it, they can get right into the heart of what Jerry Garcia did day 1 to day X, right? It's going to be difficult for us to find out how many shows Pandit Ravi Shankar played in India. It's you know, It's going to be difficult. You're going to have to fix an appointment with his wife. She may have the records, she'll blame someone else will blame someone else. There'll be an old Gupta ji who didn't do something. Some other guy sold a diary to someone else. God knows what the shit, right? And it's just, this problem is not unique to India. It exists in a lot of other places as well. This lack of record keeping organization kind of thing. But it builds for someone who receives you. You have to. What is music, right? If you're saying that it's sound, no, then it's also received, right? So you've got to then take into account the listener into the world of music. We can't always be talking about it from the point of view of us who make it. There's also us who listen to it, them who listen to it, them who listen to us. So those are they're very important aspects of the world of music, and I think that we might need to account for them as well in this discussion.
To round back up to the previous answer you gave, I don't know, a little long back. Do you remember anyone per se, or a conversation which make you felt like this person, the way he reviews music is so great that he is a musician?
I had there are 2 or 3 of those instances, but I'll tell you one which was an extremely humbling experience for me. I was fairly young, and I had been recruited to play with a fairly senior bunch of musicians, very respected bunch of musicians, and it was a one-off gig, and it was a reunion gig and things like that. And my musical, let's say, knowledge of Western music, whatever, does, at least in my opinion, run deep. And I was wearing my attitude on my shoulder at that point. I've heard it all. I've heard loads and loads of classical music. I've heard jazz and blues and this, that, and the other. And here I was. I'd been called to play with the old guys, so I must be good because I'm a cat, right? And I'm playing, and this guy's looking at me, and he's drinking, and every now and then he'd sort of nod his head in disapproval. Sometimes he'd nod his head in approval, and so a bit of a vibe developed. We never spoke, but there was this vibe, and it's one of those guys you'd lock onto and wonder as to what's going on. When you're drumming, you have all the time in the world behind the drum set, right? You just view the world ahead of you. And so I was trying to figure out what this gentleman's what this gentleman was thinking about, what was going on in his mind. And at the end of the show, I was tired. There was an intermission. He tried coming to me during the intermission, but I turned and walked away. I wasn't being rude, but at that time I needed to stay focused with what I was doing. We hadn't rehearsed, so I'd been given the list of songs in the morning. That added to my arrogance, the fact that you can give me a list of songs in the morning and I play them, by the evening without even rehearsing with you guys, etc. But I have a method, so I had to sequester myself, so I could rehearse the songs in my head and stuff like that. After the show was over, there was a lot of, hey, you played well, and I wasn't saying it, but in my head was, I know, and I don't want to speak to you any longer. This guy came and said that, I need to speak to you. And for some reason or the other, I thought, just because of the manner in which he said it, I thought it would be disrespectful for me to say no, because he's older, he was way, way older than I was. But he started off as, do you mind if I give you some feedback on your playing? So I was, yeah, okay, but can we do it a little later? Band, pack up my things, cymbals, this, that. So he said I have to leave. And so then I said, why don't we, we'll be here tomorrow. No, I gotta go. It's okay, it's all right. And I realized that I made a bit of a mistake. I thought that was it. He gave me one more chance. He said he turned around and said, it'll take 2 minutes. I jumped at it. I realized. I jumped at it. Let's sit down. This guy broke down things with regard to how I played, with regard to how other people played. And initially I was like, is this guy a has-been musician? He said, I can't play a thing in my life, And he spoke and he spoke and he spoke, and Tanmay, I listened to him for a good 2 hours. I was drinking. I didn't say a word. I just kept listening to him, and I was weeping because this guy knew everything about what we did. He had heard everything that I did. He knew what I did in the 15th bar with my left hand, how I changed a hi-hat pattern in some chorus, how this guy changed a chord, why this guy had played the solo differently. He had heard this guitarist play the same solo 30 years before in the same hotel room or whatever it was, differently, why it was different. The guitar was. I was in the presence of a genius, some sort of genius, that kind of memory, that kind of association. It was, I was humbled, and ever since then, I it changed the way I look at whoever it is who's sitting across me. Now, I don't know who you are. You might strip me of everything that I know. And you will do it with humility. That makes it even worse because you'll credit me through at no point will you say you played badly. And it was an unbelievable experience. So for me, that shut the door on a lot of things. I'm not saying it fixed my arrogance or whatever, but it shut the door on a lot of preconceptions that I had. And it was a changing experience for me.
Last round of questions.